Stand up now. You don't belong here.
I'm waiting for the bus. This is a public stop.
You've got complaints. Move or you're going in.
I'm a disabled veteran. I have rights. You're about to make a serious mistake.
Officer Derek Holcomb had been patrolling the streets of Richmond for 6 years when he made the decision that would end his career, bankrupt a local business, and cost the city taxpayers $6.5 million. He was 29 years old, physically imposing and entirely convinced that his badge gave him the authority to curate the sidewalk as he saw fit. He viewed himself as a soldier on the front lines, a warrior against disorder. But on a bright Tuesday morning in April, the disorder he decided to eliminate was Master Sergeant Elias Thorne, a 58-year-old retired Army veteran who was sitting on a public bench minding his own business and waiting for a bus to take him to a medical appointment. What Holcomb did next, ignoring the man's calm explanation, kicking a cane out from under a disabled veteran, and arresting a decorated war hero in front of a street full of witnesses, would become a definitive case study in how arrogance and bias can dismantle a life's work in under 15 minutes. Before we get into the details of the incident, I want to know where you're tuning in from. If you believe that our veterans deserve better than to be treated like criminals on the streets they fought to defend, please hit that subscribe button. We bring you these stories because accountability only happens when the truth is dragged into the light. The bus stop was located on West Broad Street, a rapidly changing corridor of the city where old brick storefronts were being gutted and replaced with high-end boutiques, artisanal bakeries, and coffee shops that sold lattes for $7. It was a neighborhood in transition where the gritty reality of the city was being painted over with a veneer of luxury. It was 10:15 a.m. The sun was shining and the street was busy with shoppers, delivery trucks, and pedestrians. Sitting on the metal bench at the bus stop was Elias Thorne. Elias had served 24 years in the United States Army. He had deployed to Panama, Somalia, and the Persian Gulf. During Operation Desert Storm, while leading a supply convoy near the Iraqi border, his vehicle had struck an improvised explosive device. The blast had killed his driver and shredded the muscles and nerves in Elias's right leg. He had undergone 12 surgeries to save the limb. He walked with a heavy, pronounced limp and required a sturdy oak cane to get around. That morning, Elias was dressed in a clean plaid flannel shirt tucked into pressed khaki work pants. He wore well-oiled leather boots that were 10 years old but meticulously cared for. On his head sat a faded ball cap with the emblem of the 1st Cavalry Division. He was a man of routine and discipline. His appointment at the Hunter Holmes McGuire Fifeva Medical Center was at 11:30 a.m. He had arrived at the bus stop at 10:05 a.m., exactly 10 minutes before the scheduled arrival of the bus, just as he always did. He wasn't bothering anyone. He wasn't asking for money. He wasn't shouting at traffic. He was sitting with his hands resting on the head of his cane, watching the world go by with the quiet patience of a man who had seen enough chaos to appreciate stillness. But directly behind the bus stop sat Lumina, a high-end clothing boutique that had opened 6 months prior. And inside Lumina, standing behind a display of imported silk scarves, was the person who decided Elias Thorne didn't belong. Julianne Vance was 34 years old. She had poured her inheritance and her husband's savings into Lumina, envisioning it as the premier fashion destination for the city's elite. She was obsessed with aesthetics. Every mannequin, every light fixture, every inch of the sidewalk in front of her store had to project an image of exclusivity and wealth. She was the type of business owner who sprayed expensive perfume near the entryway so that customers would associate the very air of the shop with luxury. To Julianne, the sight of an older black man in a flannel shirt and old boots sitting on the bench directly in front of her window display was a flaw in the design. It didn't matter that it was a public bus stop. It didn't matter that he was sitting still. In her mind, he was clutter. He was a deterrent to the wealthy clientele she was trying to attract. She watched him through the glass for 5 minutes, her irritation growing with every second he remained. She didn't see a veteran. She didn't see a neighbor. She saw a vagrant. She saw a problem that needed to be managed. "He's scaring people away," she muttered to her sales associate. though no customers were in the store at the moment. "Look at him. He's just staring. It's aggressive." Elias was actually checking his watch, worried that the bus might be running late. Julianne smoothed her blouse, took a deep breath, and decided she wasn't going to wait for him to move on his own. She picked up the store phone and dialed the police non-emergency line, but her tone suggested a crisis in progress. "Richmond Police, what is the nature of your call?" "Yes, this is Julianne Vance, owner of Lumina on West Broad. I need an officer here immediately. There is a man loitering directly in front of my store. He's been here for an hour, he's refusing to leave, and he's harassing my customers." The dispatcher asked the standard questions. "Ma'am, is he becoming physical? Is he armed?" Julianne hesitated, knowing that a simple loitering call might not get a fast response. She looked at Elias through the window, who was simply adjusting his grip on his cane. He's acting very erratic," she lied, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "He's waving a large stick around and he's shouting at women walking by. I'm afraid he might attack someone. He looks unstable." "We have a unit in the area, ma'am. Officer dispatched." Julianne hung up the phone with a sense of grim satisfaction. She told herself she was protecting the neighborhood. She told herself she was ensuring safety. In reality, she was weaponizing the police to curate her view. Officer Derek Holcomb was 3 blocks away when the call came through on his computer terminal. "Disturbance on West Broad. Male subject refusing to leave, possibly aggressive, brandishing a weapon, a stick, or club. Complainant alleges harassment of pedestrians." Holcomb's eyes narrowed. He was already having a bad week. He'd been reprimanded by his sergeant 2 days prior for speaking rudely to a city councilman during a traffic stop. Holcomb felt he was misunderstood. He believed that policing was about dominance and control. In his view, if you weren't controlling the street was controlling you. He had a file of internal complaints that was thick for someone with only 6 years on the job. Complaints about excessive force intimidation and profiling. But like so many others, he had slipped through the cracks of a system that often prioritized closing cases over correcting behavior. When he read "aggressive male" and "brandishing a weapon," Holcomb didn't think of a disabled man with a cane. He pictured a violent threat. He pictured a fight, and he was ready for it. He flipped on his lights and hit the siren for 2 seconds to clear the intersection, accelerating his patrol SUV. He didn't plan to investigate. He planned to neutralize. He arrived at the scene less than 3 minutes later. He pulled the cruiser up onto the curb, partially blocking the crosswalk, a power move designed to shock and awe. He stepped out of the vehicle, adjusting his utility belt, his hand resting instinctively near his holstered firearm. He scanned the area and saw Elias. Elias was still sitting. He hadn't moved. He watched the police car pull up with a mild curiosity, assuming the officer was there for a traffic accident or a robbery nearby. He didn't realize he was the target until Holcomb walked straight toward him, eyes hidden behind mirrored sunglasses, chest puffed out. Holcomb stopped 4 feet from the bench. He didn't say hello. He didn't ask what was going on. "You need to move, now." Elias looked up, squinting slightly against the sun. He kept his hands visible on his knees. "Excuse me, officer. I said move along. We've got complaints. You're harassing people and you're loitering. Pack it up." Elias blinked, confused. "Officer, I'm not harassing anyone. I'm just waiting for the 22 South bus. It's due in 5 minutes." "Bus stop is for loading and unloading, not for camping out," Holcomb snapped. "The owner of this store says you've been here an hour and you're threatening people with that stick. So get up and get walking or you're going in." "This isn't a stick, son. It's a cane," Elias said, his voice deep and steady, the voice of a man who had led troops in combat. "And I haven't been here an hour. I got here at 10:05. I have a medical appointment at the VA hospital. I'm not moving until my bus comes." Holcomb stiffened. He wasn't used to people talking back, certainly not men he had already categorized as vagrants. The word son grated on him. It felt like a challenge to his authority. "I'm not going to ask you again," Holcomb said, stepping closer, entering Elias's personal space. "This is a lawful order. You are trespassing on a public nuisance complaint. Leave the area immediately." "I have a right to be here," Elias said, his posture straightening as much as his back would allow. "I am a citizen waiting for public transit. I fought for this country, officer. I know my rights." "I don't care what you think you know," Holcomb sneered. "Let me see some ID now." This is where the training should have kicked in. A seasoned officer would have recognized the demeanor of the man, calm, articulate, not intoxicated, not erratic. A seasoned officer would have looked at the weapon and seen an orthopedic cane. But Holcomb wasn't looking for facts. He was looking for compliance. Elias sighed, shifting his weight. "Fine, my wallet is in my back pocket." Elias moved his right hand slowly toward his hip. "Don't you reach," Holcomb shouted, dropping his hand to his gun and unsnapping the retention hood. "I said, let me see ID. I didn't say reach for a weapon." "I am reaching for my wallet," Elias said, freezing his hand in place. "You asked for ID. It is in my back pocket." "Stand up," Holcomb barked. "Get on your feet. Turn around." "I told you I can't stand up quickly," Elias said, frustration beginning to creep into his tone. "My leg is damaged. I need my cane." "You're resisting," Holcomb stated, constructing the narrative in real time. "That's it." Holcomb lunged forward. He didn't offer assistance. He grabbed Elias by the left arm and yanked. Elias gasped as pain shot through his lower back. He tried to plant his feet, but his bad leg, the right one with the reconstructed nerves, buckled under the sudden shift in weight. "Whoa, easy," Elias shouted. "My leg!" Holcomb didn't listen. He viewed the stumble as resistance. He swept his foot out and kicked the oak cane away. It clattered across the pavement, skittering into the gutter. Without the cane, Elias was helpless. He collapsed onto one knee, the concrete biting into his shin. "Get on the ground, flat on your stomach," Holcomb yelled, pressing his weight onto Elias's shoulder. "I can't," Elias grunted through gritted teeth. "My leg doesn't bend that way. I'm a disabled veteran." "Stop fighting me," Holcomb roared, playing to the crowd that was now gathering. Shoppers had stopped. People were coming out of the coffee shop next door. Julianne Vance was watching from her window, a look of sudden uncertainty crossing her face as she saw the aggressive vagrant being manhandled while clearly struggling with a disability. Smartphones were raised. The scene was being recorded from at least 5 different angles. "You are breaking my leg," Elias yelled, his voice straining with genuine agony now. "I am Master Sergeant Elias Thorne. You are making a mistake. Hands behind your back." Holcomb forced Elias's arms back, applying the handcuffs with unnecessary force, ratcheting them down until they bit into the skin. Elias stopped struggling. He realized that physical resistance would only give this officer an excuse to use more force, perhaps lethal force. He went into survival mode, the same cold, detached mindset that had gotten him through the desert 30 years ago. He let his body go limp, enduring the pain. "I am complying," Elias said, loud enough for the witnesses to hear. "I am not resisting. I am a retired master sergeant. I have identification in my back pocket. This officer is assaulting me." "Shut up," Holcomb panted, hauling Elias up by the arm. Elias groaned as he was forced to stand on his bad leg without his cane. "You're under arrest for disorderly conduct, loitering, and resisting arrest." "My cane," Elias said, sweat beading on his forehead. "I need my cane." "You don't need a weapon," Holcomb said. He marched Elias toward the patrol car. A woman in a business suit stepped forward from the crowd. "Officer, that man is clearly disabled. He was just sitting there. He wasn't doing anything." "Back up, ma'am," Holcomb shouted, pointing a finger at her. "This is an active police investigation. Back up or you're next." He shoved Elias into the back of the cruiser. Elias had to drag his bad leg in manually with his hands because the muscles wouldn't respond. Holcomb slammed the door. He walked back, picked up the cane from the gutter, and threw it into the trunk of the car. He didn't interview the witnesses. He didn't talk to Julianne Vance to confirm her story. He felt the rush of victory. He had cleared the street. He had won. Do you think officers who escalate situations with disabled citizens should face immediate suspension? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. The ride to the precinct took 20 minutes. Elias sat in the back, the hard plastic seat digging into his injuries. He closed his eyes and began a breathing exercise, counting down from 10. He was memorizing details. The car number 402. The officer's nameplate, Holcomb. The time, 10:28 a.m. He didn't speak to Holcomb. He knew that anything he said would be twisted. He saved his words for someone who would listen. When they arrived at the precinct, Holcomb pulled Elias out of the car. Elias stumbled again, nearly falling. Holcomb held him up by the handcuffs, marching him through the rear intake door. They walked past the holding cells and into the processing area. Sitting at the high desk was Sergeant Thomas Miller. Miller was 55 years old, a man with gray, crew-cut hair and eyes that had seen everything. He was a Marine Corps veteran who had served in the chaotic years just after Vietnam and through the Cold War. He was known for being fair tough and absolutely intolerant of sloppy police work. He looked up as Holcomb dragged Elias toward the bench. Miller's eyes didn't go to the officer. They went to the prisoner. He saw the flannel shirt, the work boots, the 1st Cavalry hat, but mostly he saw the pain in the man's face and the way he was favoring his right leg. "What do we have here, Holcomb?" Miller asked, his voice flat. Disorderly and resisting, Holcomb said, sounding winded but proud. "Guy was loitering on West Broad. Refused to leave. Got aggressive when I tried to ID him. Had to put him down." Miller looked at Elias. "That true? You get aggressive." Elias stood as straight as he could, looking Miller directly in the eye. "Sergeant, I was sitting at a bus stop waiting for the 22 South to take me to the VA. I am a retired master sergeant. I have a 90% disability rating from combat injuries in my right leg. This officer kicked my cane away and arrested me when I reached for my ID." The room went silent. Miller's gaze snapped back to Holcomb. "You kicked his cane. It was a weapon, Sarge," Holcomb said defensively. "He was waving it around. Complainant said he was threatening people." "Did you see him threaten anyone?" Miller asked. "Well, no, but when I got there, he was obstinate. He wouldn't move." Miller looked back at Elias. "You said you have ID." "In my back pocket," Elias said. "He wouldn't let me show it." Miller stood up. He walked around the desk. "Turn around. Let me get that wallet." Miller carefully pulled the worn leather wallet from Elias's pocket. He opened it. The first thing he saw was the Blue Department of Defense retiree ID card. Rank Master Sergeant. Status retired. Miller flipped the flap of the wallet. Behind a clear plastic window was a small laminated card, a copy of a citation. Silver Star, awarded for gallantry in action against an enemy of the United States. Miller stared at the card for a long moment. His jaw tightened. The air in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. He looked at Holcomb. The look was not one of a supervisor to a subordinate. It was the look of a man looking at something disgusting on the bottom of his shoe. Holcomb Miller said, his voice dangerously quiet. "You arrested a master sergeant with a Silver Star for sitting at a bus stop." "Sarge, I didn't know." "You didn't know because you didn't check," Miller snapped. "You kicked a disabled vet's cane. Are you out of your mind?" "He refused an order," Holcomb protested, though his confidence was beginning to crumble. "He was waiting for a bus," Miller roared, slamming the wallet down on the counter. "Since when is waiting for a bus a crime in this city? Uncuff him. Now." "But the paperwork." "I said uncuff him." Holcomb fumbled for his keys. He unlocked the handcuffs. Elias rubbed his wrists where the skin was broken and bleeding slightly. Miller turned to the intake officer. "Get the lieutenant down here. Get a medic, and get this man a chair." "I don't need a medic," Elias said, his voice calm but icy. "I need my cane, and I need a lawyer." Lieutenant Sarah Graves arrived 3 minutes later. She was the watch commander, a no-nonsense woman who had been trying to clean up the department's image for years. When Miller briefed her on the situation, showing her the ID, the citation, and the intake video of Elias limping, she turned pale. She turned to Holcomb, who was standing in the corner looking sullen. "Officer Holcomb," she said, "did you verify the complainant's story before making contact?" "No, ma'am. I responded to the threat." "Did the suspect display a weapon?" "He had the cane." "Did he swing it at you?" "No, but..." "Did you verify his identity before going hands-on?" "He was reaching lieutenant, officer safety." "He's 58 years old and crippled," Miller interjected. "You think he was going to outdraw you with a wallet?" Lieutenant Graves turned to Elias, who was sitting in a chair rubbing his knee. "Mr. Thorne," she said, her tone apologetic. "I am incredibly sorry for this. This appears to be a massive misunderstanding. We are going to release you immediately. We can give you a ride to the VA." Elias looked up. "Lieutenant, this wasn't a misunderstanding. This was an assault. Your officer profiled me, denied me my rights, and caused physical injury to a combat wound. I was kidnapped from a public street." "We can discuss filing a complaint," Graves said. "Oh, I will be filing more than a complaint," Elias said. He stood up slowly, using the counter for support since his cane was still in Holcomb's trunk. "I fought for this country for 24 years. I didn't do it so some boy with a badge could treat me like trash because he didn't like the way I looked on a bench." He pointed a finger at Holcomb. "You disgraced that uniform, son, and you're going to answer for it." Graves turned to Holcomb. "Badge and gun, on the desk. You're on administrative leave pending an internal investigation." "Lieutenant, you can't be serious," Holcomb stammered. "Over a loitering bust." "It's not a loitering bust," Graves said. "It's a civil rights violation. Give me the badge." Holcomb placed his badge and gun on the desk. For the first time, the reality of what he had done began to sink in. He hadn't just arrested a bum. He had arrested a hero. By 5:00 p.m. that evening, the video was everywhere. The woman in the business suit who had yelled at Holcomb had recorded the entire arrest. She posted it to Twitter with the caption, "Richmond police assault disabled veteran waiting for bus. Officer kicks his cane away. Disgusting." The video went viral within hours. It showed Elias sitting calmly. It showed Holcomb's aggression. It showed the cane flying into the gutter. It showed Elias's dignified plea, "I am a master sergeant." The outrage was volcanic. Veterans groups, civil rights organizations, and ordinary citizens flooded the police department's phone lines. The identity of the complainant leaked the next day. A delivery driver who had been dropping off packages at Lumina had heard Julianne Vance make the call and saw the video. He posted on Reddit. The lady who called is Julianne Vance, owner of Lumina. She lied. She said he was waving a stick. He was just sitting there. The internet turned its gaze toward Lumina. The boutique's Yelp page was bombarded with one-star reviews. Protesters gathered outside the store with signs reading, "Veterans welcome, bigots not," and "Fashion over fascism." Julianne Vance tried to issue a statement claiming she felt unsafe, but the video of Elias sitting peacefully contradicted her every word. She closed the store 3 days later. It never reopened. Officer Derek Holcomb was fired 2 months later. The internal investigation found that he had violated 14 departmental policies, including use of force de-escalation protocols and the Americans with Disabilities Act. The chief of police called his actions a stain on the badge. But the real reckoning came in federal court. Elias Thorne didn't just want an apology, he wanted change. He hired a high-powered civil rights attorney. They filed a lawsuit against the city, the police department, and Officer Holcomb individually. The lawsuit alleged unlawful arrest, excessive force, malicious prosecution, and violation of the Fourth Amendment. The city's lawyers took one look at the video, looked at Elias's service record, and looked at the medical reports detailing the new damage to his leg. They knew they couldn't win. A jury would destroy them. They settled for $6.5 million. But Elias didn't buy a mansion. He didn't buy a sports car. He took the money and established the Thorn Legal Defense Fund for veterans. The organization provides free legal counsel to veterans who have been mistreated by law enforcement or wrongfully denied benefits. He also bought the building that had housed Lumina. He turned it into a community center for at-risk youth, a place where kids could learn discipline history and respect the very things Officer Holcomb had lacked. Elias Thorn is 61 years old now. He still takes the bus to the VA. But now, when he sits on that bench, the police officers who drive by wave at him. They know who he is. They know what he stands for. This story isn't just about a bad cop or a lawsuit. It's about the invisible armor of dignity that some men wear, an armor that doesn't shine like a badge but is forged in fire. Elias Thorn was a soldier. He knew that the true measure of strength isn't how loud you can yell or how fast you can pull a gun. It's about holding your ground when the world tries to knock you down. It's a reminder that we never truly know the history of the strangers we pass on the street. The man in the faded flannel might be a hero. The person sitting quietly on a bench might have sacrificed more for your freedom than you will ever know. When we let bias cloud our vision, we don't just hurt others. We blind ourselves to the greatness around us. We mistake patience for weakness and silence for submission. Elias Thorn taught an entire city that respect is not something you demand with handcuffs. It is something you command by who you are. What do you think? Should there be a mandatory federal registry for officers fired for misconduct so they can't work in other precincts? And do you think business owners who make false 911 calls should be charged with a crime? Let me know in the comments below. And if you believe these stories matter, please like and subscribe. Your support helps us keep telling the truth.